Hello, Victory, and welcome back to part 2 of our previous podcast with Dr. Mike. And we're going to get into this more about what we talked about before.
Yes. And so in the book that you and Shanti Feldhahn wrote together,
Correct.
Secrets of Sex and Marriage, you guys have this word that it's a Jewish word, right? It's a Hebrew word. And can you say that again?
Yada.
Yada.
Yada. Y-A-D-A is kind of how we will write it out. Yep.
Awesome. And it's really...
And if they've listened to Seinfeld, they're very aware of the word too. So
Yada,
Oh,
yada,
wait.
yada.
Yada, yada, yada. It's coming together. The light bulb's going off. Okay. And so with that, the God created sex. And as I said in the first podcast, that it's almost as if he was the artist that had this canvas and he painted this beautiful picture.
Right.
And the enemy came in with his own paint and covered God's beautiful canvas up and beautiful picture that he
Distorts
painted
it.
for us.
Yeah.
And he distorted it. And can you just kind of go into that a little bit more? But what I want to hit on, the topic I really want to hit on today with that is that there has been abuse. There has been, molestations and rapes and things that has been tainted.
Right.
God had this beautiful picture and the enemy came in with abuse and people are hurting. And now how do they move forward in marriage with sex when it's been a hurtful, traumatic experience?
because we still, I think deep in us, we have this sense of what that picture is supposed to look like. And we're pursuing it. And often we pursue it in unhealthy ways, but we want the playfulness, the intimacy, the knowing of one another, that deep, profound, intimate moment. And there are actually a lot of things that bring sexual trauma into a marriage. We think of some of the severe things like abuse or rape, any kind of a coercive.
Yeah.
But often that happens within marriage, where we feel coerced, where we don't feel like we have choice, and that creates woundedness. Infertility creates woundedness, and a lot of couples fight through that sex is not about the intimacy of us together. Sex becomes a medical thing that we have to do just right, and everybody else has access to. Childbirth. We know that about 85% of couples in one study, the women experience a clinical level of sexual dysfunction within these 6 months to 3 years post-childbirth. Only 16% of them sought help. We have this enormous number of women especially, and then for guys that hits as well. So even something as beautiful as childbirth can be wounding to our sex life. There's so many, what we choose to engage in, pornography or other practices and behaviors, can all be part of what distorts the image. And the challenge is, how do we lean in and continue to pursue? I think part of it starts with just acknowledging that it's not what God had designed. But like we said last time, figuring out what the vision is and beginning to pursue it. We spend a lot of time in one of the chapters talking about extending grace and accepting that I really wanted my sex life to be something other than what it is, but because of medical issues, my body doesn't respond the way I want it to anymore. Maybe it's normal. Maybe it's just aging, but I still I have to accept that it's not going to be. I have to accept that my husband doesn't want what I want, or my wife doesn't want what I want, and figure out what the new vision is and begin to be creative and explore. If we've disincarnated the act and made it just about the body of the act, then couples tend to give up on their sex life early on because it's not going physically the way I want it to. When we accept it's not, then we can extend grace for it and pursue the richness that can still be there. So a 75-year-old couple sitting in front of me, and he says, at 75, I am experiencing the best sex in my life. At 75, my parts don't always show up for the party. And he says at 75, her parts can't always accommodate my parts. He says, because we're older, we're not 20 any longer. But at 75, I am having the best sex of my life. And it's because he learned that it wasn't just about what we do. It wasn't focusing on the woundedness. It wasn't focusing on what's not. It was saying, all of this has been stripped away from us. There's been woundedness. There's been something that's not been healthy. But I am not going to give this over to the enemy.
That's good.
I am going to continue to pursue what God has, because he's a powerful redeemer. He's a powerful healer. And I know that if we work together with him, this can still be a really rich, intimate, profound time that only the two of us share. And it may not look like we ever thought it was going to look, but it can still be really rich and good and be sacred and something that just the two of us share together.
I like that it's like it might not look the way that we always thought it would.
Probably
because I
won't.
think that's the misconception, is we have this idea of how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And it's really something that we have to grow into.
That much of the image we've been given through images, through videos, through stories, through what we see in our media, that's fantasy. It's not real.
Yeah.
And if we demand the fantasy of ourselves and each other, we're always fighting for that distorted image versus digging down underneath it and figuring out the beauty of who we are. Helping a wife to really experience the beauty of her husband is when he comes to her hungry, but to see he's hungry for connection with me and make sure he is hungry for connection with his wife. That he's not just pursuing this false image, that he's not trying to make something happen that isn't, and for him to truly view the beauty in her and to enjoy connecting with each other, even if it's not the fantasy that they played out in their mind. That can still be really good and very rich. That's when sex gets just beautiful for a couple.
Yeah.
That's really cool. The I want to. You talked about a 75-year-old man and how they're enjoying intimacy at such at an older age like that. And I know we all want to
life goals.
Life goals here. We all want to enjoy that, but here's the thing. I know as we get older, we experience things. We go through different times of our lives, such as my wife was ill and she was in the hospital for over about a week, and then she dealt with repercussions from that. Right. And there's short-term things that happen, sometimes long-term physical things that happen to our bodies, or we experience changes as we get older. How, as a couple, how should we navigate those things and maintain the yada, this sacred, intimate time that we should have when things just aren't working the way they should or we would like for them to?
And I think you just defined it. We stay focused on the yada. If we're focused on how powerful an orgasm is, sorry, as we get older, it's not always going to be that way. Our parts are designed not to continue to work in the same way. I think that's God's design. I think it's protective, especially of our wives. God did a lot to protect women. And I think that's part of how it's supposed to be. It's not how we want it to be, but it is. And as we keep it focused on the yada, on the intimacy, we can experience that through the entirety of life, even when our bodies aren't working well. But it means pursuing what's rich and good, not accepting the false image, not pursuing just the surface pleasure, not just pursuing just the body pleasure. It's okay to pursue that. It's important to pursue it, but not an exclusion. One of the things that I like to flag for people is, for example, pain.
Yes.
Our study repeated what most other studies find, that especially for women, the occurrence of pain during sexual activity is extremely high. And that just breaks my heart. One of the studies showed that most women need to see between 6 and 9 medical professionals before they actually get an accurate diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah. And I tell guys, how many times would you go into a doctor saying, something's wrong with my parts? Guys would go, yeah, not even once. And these women are having to go to multiple clinicians, multiple doctors saying something's wrong with my parts. I don't think it's supposed to hurt like it
6
does.
to 9
And that's just,
Wow.
that's broken, that's wrong. And I am so sorry to women that it's, because almost always we can fix that. People who are well trained in it, that know what to do, can give the guidance that generally totally removes the pain. If not, makes it so that it's not an issue. But it requires somebody who actually knows what they're doing, and most professionals don't. And so saying to couples, there are some things that have gotten painted over that we can truly fix. Accepting that, well, it hurts most of the time that I have sex, and about a third of the time it's distracting, is what women are telling us. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's find somebody that can help you to do an accurate diagnosis. And we work with a lot of couples that have never been able to consummate their marriage because of the intensity of the pain.
Oh, wow.
And that is one of those things that we're really good at. We know how to fix. And so there are times that we can totally remove that distorted image and help them to get back to something that is rich and good. But it means talking to somebody who is trained, who knows how to address it.
Yes. So, ladies, Dr. Steitzma is saying there's hope.
No, there's definitely
There is
hope.
hope.
Please
There's
don't
hope.
tolerate it hurting.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. It's not supposed to.
Well, and I mean, sex is, and intimacy is such a, behind closed doors. It's such a taboo subject that a lot of
Which
women
is okay for it to be sacred.
don't really, yes.
But
Sometimes you do have to go see a doctor. Sometimes you do need help. Sometimes you do need therapy.
Right.
So, so that's good.
I tell the couples that I'm working with, I'm so sorry to be asking some of the questions that I'm going to ask, because this is sacred. It's none of my business. But we need to go there so we can reset this picture. We can help it to be as beautiful as it can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Cool.
So I'm just thinking, those moments where it's a wife's like, I went to the OBGYN and this is what they did for me. And I'm like, well, maybe you need to go back, or maybe you need to go find a different.
Find somebody who's actually specifically trained in working with.
Would there be a name or?
Yeah.
Who would they look for?
If they go to secretsofsexandmarriage.com, we have 3 articles. One for men, when it hurts, because a significant number of men experience pain with sex as well. 2 for women, that address, here's what to do, here's what to sort through, and here's the type of professional that you want to seek. And then we link them to some of the organizations where these professionals are actually specifically trained in working with sexual pain.
Oh, that's very helpful.
Yep.
That's a great resource.
So it's all listed on the secretsofsexandmarriage.com website.
Oh, very good. And so in this, you said something before we got in this podcast I thought was interesting. They're kind of moving over a little bit here, but we're talking about parents who have multiple children and how children can, oftentimes think it'd be a big distraction within marriage.
Well, I can speak from experience. We feel like it is, we have a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 5-year-old. Like, how do you have rich intimacy with that many kids?
There's always someone around.
Age span. There's always somebody around.
And I had always said that, we just have to be gracious and understand, because that's going to be a distractor. And I think that's true. It is. But when we did the research, now this was 501 married couples. So, and it's what we call a population representative sample. So it's not specifically Christians. It is designed to be a sample that reflects the 2018 U.S. Census data. So these are your normal couple, as close as we can come to it. And it's anonymous, so the couples didn't know what each other were saying, but we could compare. We could ask the wife, what would your husband say? And then we could ask the husband what he really says. And it's so much fun to compare those answers. But one of the things we did was look at frequency of sex versus number of children. And I really expected that the more kids they had, the less sex they would have. And when the data first came back, I was convinced that I had done an error in, I've had 7 PhD level courses in research and statistics. And I looked at it and went, yeah, I messed up. And I reran it again. I reran it 3 times. I went all the way back to the original data, recrunched the data all the way through because I was convinced that it was wrong. And then we have another 1,000 individuals who are married, but we don't have their spouses. And I looked at that data, the same numbers came back. And what it was is those who don't have kids were far more likely to be sexless, less than having sex less than once a month. Those that had 3 or more kids were far more likely to even be having sex daily or more. The frequency of sex, the more kids, was just astounding to us.
Yeah,
that was one of the huge surprises from this research to me.
Wow.
And now that doesn't necessarily mean we need to have more kids so we have more sex.
Is that the key? Is it the key to have more kids?
Not opposed to trying that, but this is correlational data. I suspect that couples who have more kids have a different value around marriage and family and sexuality.
You make time for it.
Because it's important, because these are the values that we have.
Yeah.
But to me, it was so hopeful to be able to say to couples, yeah, kids don't have to be the detractor.
Yeah.
In fact, they're probably, if that's what's important to you, you're going to still make it rich. You're still going to make it good.
Well, you're dispelling my mindset. So,
so I don't think there's anything that the enemy can put over top of that picture, whether it's being natural, normal, or something that's done to us, that God's redeeming power can't help us to remove and experience the richness of what God has designed for us, and He would love to bless us with. And I think that's the overall picture.
absolutely. That's awesome.
That is really,
Thank you
really
for
cool.
sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing today and a second part of the podcast. We're going a little deeper than what we did before. This has been very helpful and very enriching.
I appreciate it. And thanks so much for being open to it. This is a tough subject, especially for churches to tackle. So
Yeah.
Well, we need to start talking about it.
That's right.
we've got the
do.
answers.
It doesn't need to be
Well,
taboo.
and I think with this book, Secrets of Sex and Marriage, you guys, you and Shanti have went so deep into this, because here you bring in this mindset of a therapist, and she brings in the studies, the research, and she's able to dig deep into what the numbers actually are. And I think marrying the two of those is so rich, and so I find so much value in this book and what you guys have brought to this.
Thanks.
So thank you again.
Good.
All right.